WENY Political Analyst Dr. Jim Twombly joining us in studio today. We are talking about the redistricting issue in Alabama. Jim, we've had a hiatus the past couple of weeks while you were enjoying some vacation, but we want to say welcome back to you.
Thank you.
Diving right in, there are any number of political stories we could have chosen this week. Indictment watch happening, but we're focusing on one with a long history, but also something it could have implications for other states. Recently, the U.S. Supreme Court upheld an order that Alabama had violated the Voting Rights Act by designing a congressional district that diluted the voting power of black voters. And as of last Friday, the Alabama state legislature has still refused to comply with the directive from the Supreme Court. So, Jim, how can Alabama not comply with a Supreme Court order?
Well, whether it is forced to or not is really a matter for the federal courts. The district court can impose what's called a special master, as we had here in New York, to redraw the lines, which is what we did here, as I just said, in New York. The latest behavior is just part of a long string of conduct by Alabama, diluting voting power of particular groups of voters. The landmark case of Reynolds versus Sims was one that struck down the so-called federal analogy. That was where Alabama and other states argued that their upper chamber should be like the U.S. Senate and should represent lesser political jurisdictions. The Supreme Court then said that, well, that's not really the case. Those political jurisdictions don't have the same sovereignty as states, so the federal analogy fell. And in that case, they also, the famous expression, legislators represent people, not rocks and trees. Alabama was also the location excuse me, for the infamous Bloody Sunday incident at the Edmund Pettus Bridge. More recently, the court ruled in favor of Alabama in the case of Shelby County versus Holder that held that certain parts of the Voting Rights Act were no longer constitutional.
Okay, and so some people might be wondering why this argument over what is essentially one district. Why is it significant?
Well, there are basically two reasons. First, there's a purely political reason. With the margin in the U.S. House of Representatives so close, every seat matters. So much so that supposedly House Speaker Kevin McCarthy has spoken with Alabama Republicans about this particular map. Second, the case is about the larger issue of disenfranchisement of voters regardless of the reason for the disenfranchisement.
Okay, and then what is the relevance of this specific situation for the rest of the country and in particular New York State?
Well, as part of the larger voting rights issues and cases, like the North Carolina case that struck down the independent state legislature theory, it demonstrates that even this court, which has been less rigorous in enforcing voting rights, will only go so far. We just had a ruling from the appellate division of the New York State Supreme Court ordering a redrawing of the congressional district map, which is now being appealed to the State Court of Appeals. But that court has moved to the left from where it was before and would be more likely to rule in favor of a new redrawing of the map.
All right, well, we will wait to see what happens there.
Indeed, we will.
All right, Jim, thank you so much.
My pleasure.